I'm Camille. I'm 31, and the day I saw my father smiling in a Christmas photo with his new wife and perfect children, the family he chose after abandoning us, I felt something shift in me. Not rage, not grief, something colder. A calm, calculated decision. I would destroy the fantasy life he built by pretending we never existed. If you've ever been left behind like garbage while someone else gets the best of the person who used to tuck you in at night, leave a comment below and subscribe. This one's for all of us who were told, without words, that we weren't worth staying for. I was 10 years old the night my father vanished from our lives. It was a Thursday. My mom had made dinner, canned chili over baked potatoes, which was her go-to on nights she had to work the overnight shift at the hospital. I remember that night so vividly, the kitchen warm and yellow from the cheap overhead light, the snow falling sideways against the window like confetti. He kissed my forehead, tousled my hair, and told me he was heading out to pick up some cold medicine. I had a runny nose. "Be back before you're in bed," he said, ruffling my bangs. He never came back. At first, we didn't panic. Not right away. My mom even chuckled about it at first, saying he probably stopped by his buddy Scott's to talk politics and lost track of time. That was the kind of man he was: charming, spontaneous, a little irresponsible. But she loved him. God, did she love him? We both did, but by midnight, when his phone went straight to voicemail and the snow was really starting to pile up, her smile had vanished. I lay in bed pretending to sleep, listening to her pacing back and forth in the kitchen, making calls, leaving messages, whispering frantically to my aunt on the cordless phone. At one point, she burst into tears. I'd never heard her cry like that before. It was deep, animalistic. The next morning, she told me Daddy must have had to work an emergency shift. "You know how hospitals are," she said, her voice trembling even though she tried to sound calm. "He probably just forgot to call." I nodded. I was 10. I believed her. I wanted to, but then it was the weekend. And then Monday. And then a week. Then a month. Eventually, she stopped making excuses. She sat me down one afternoon and told me he wasn't coming back. No accident. No death. No emergency. He had chosen to leave. No warning. No goodbye. No explanation. I asked her what I'd done wrong. I remember that part. I remember her pulling me onto her lap and holding me so tight I could barely breathe. She kept saying, "You did nothing wrong." Nothing. But I didn't believe her. I stopped believing a lot of things after that. That was the year the house changed. The laughter disappeared. The hallway grew quiet. The air thick. My mother, once so warm and energetic, became hard. Not cruel, but distant. Functioning. Robotic. She went from wife to survivor overnight. Took a second job cleaning offices after her nurse shifts. Sold her wedding ring. Cut up the credit cards. Cut her hair. Cut the world out. I saw her cry exactly once after that day. She was folding laundry in the living room, and one of his old socks had somehow ended up in the pile. She stared at it for a long time before shoving it into the trash. That night, I caught her in the bathroom, gripping the sink, shoulders shaking silently. She wiped her face and said, "I'm fine." But her voice was hollow. From then on, I learned to handle my own pain. I never brought him up again, not because I didn't think about him, but because the look on her face every time I said Dad felt like stabbing someone who was already bleeding out. I grew up with that wound never fully closing. Kids at school would complain about their fathers being too strict or not letting them go to sleepovers, and I'd just smile and say, "That must be nice." Because at least their dads existed, I became quiet. Distant. I didn't go to birthday parties. I stopped inviting people over. I hated when other girls gushed about daddy-daughter dances or Father's Day cards. Every June, I'd lie and say I forgot, but I never forgot why Mom did everything she could to keep us afloat. She worked 14-hour days, came home with blistered feet, and still managed to tuck me in with a kiss. We shared a one-bedroom apartment for 2 years after we lost the house. I slept on a pull-out sofa with a spring that jabbed into my ribs. She gave up everything for me. But no matter how hard she tried, I always felt left. Like someone had looked at me and decided I wasn't enough. That's the kind of thing that stains you. I worked through high school, saved every penny. College wasn't an option. I couldn't leave my mom alone with the rent. So I found a job at a diner downtown, lied about my age, and started paying half the bills by 17. I watched my friends go off to college and post dorm selfies while I scrubbed pancake batter out of my apron and counted tips that barely covered gas. I never told anyone about my dad. Not really. I said he was gone. That was all. What could I say? That one night he kissed me goodnight and then disappeared into the snow like a ghost? That he never called, never wrote, never sent a birthday card? That he remarried, had new children, a whole new life, while we were counting quarters at laundromats. The first time I saw him again was 9 years later. I was 24, working a catering job at a high-end hotel. I just spilled sparkling water on myself and was trying to clean up when I heard a familiar voice, deep, melodic, the kind that used to sing off-key lullabies to me when I couldn't sleep. I looked up, and there he was. Same eyes. Same crooked smile, but older. Grayer. Richer. He wore a navy suit, a Rolex, and the smug ease of a man who had never been desperate in his life. Beside him was a woman with blonde curls and a surgically perfected face. A trophy wife, if I'd ever seen one. She was laughing at something he said, clutching his arm. Then I saw the kids. 2 of them. A boy and a girl. Perfectly dressed, grinning, giggling, running around his legs like golden retriever puppies. IT was the family portrait from a catalog. Warm. Wealthy. Untouched by pain, and I just stood there in my black polyester uniform, clutching a tray of hors d'oeuvres, watching the man who left us serve up his love to strangers. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and looked away. Either way, it felt like dying. That night, I threw up in the hotel bathroom. I didn't even make it to the toilet. I sobbed until my nose bled, and then went home and didn't talk to anyone for 2 days. But the real blow came later. I looked him up online. I found their family blog, their Facebook, their perfect holiday photos. #blessed, #family first, #my everything written under a photo of them in matching Christmas pajamas. And that's when something in me hardened. IT wasn't just that he left US. IT was that he erased us. He had started over. Completely. As if my mother and I were a bad dream he woke up from, and maybe I could have let it go if he had apologized. If he had shown any acknowledgement. But he didn't just abandon us. He made us invisible to us. Oh, I made a decision. He wanted a life without me. Too bad, because I was going to crash it. I didn't sleep the night I made the decision. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, the 1-bedroom walk-up I paid too much for and barely spent any time in planning, thinking, replaying every moment of my childhood with him until those memories felt like someone else's dreams. I didn't want to kill him. I wasn't crazy. I didn't even want to ruin his career or destroy his finances. I wanted something worse. I wanted him to look into my eyes, see the consequences of what he'd done, and know deep in his bones that he had failed. That I wasn't the fragile little girl he abandoned. That he had created something darker. Something he couldn't run from. But to do that, I needed access, and I was going to get IT'd. IT started with Julie, his wife. Real estate mogul, lifestyle influencer, and, apparently, Mother of the Year. Her Instagram was a goldmine. Everything was public. I scrolled through pictures of their family brunches, backyard movie nights, smiling selfies at charity galas. Her captions were as fake as her veneers, grateful for my perfectly imperfect life, and my heart is so full it might burst. #family first, #gratitude. It took me less than 20 minutes to learn the names of her children, her clients, her dog, her yoga studio, and the bakery she ordered birthday cakes from. She tagged everything. Their lives were an open book. And I was going to read every chapter. I created a new identity, nothing crazy. Just a clean, polished version of myself. A new LinkedIn, a fake email, a vague backstory. Former PR rep turned lifestyle photographer looking to relocate. I even used a professional headshot from years ago when I briefly considered marketing. Then I followed Julie's business page. Within a day, she followed back. I messaged her. Your feed is gorgeous. Just moved from Denver and would love to connect with other boss moms in the area, she replied within the hour. Julie was starving for attention, and I fed her exactly what she craved. Admiration. Validation. A mirror held up to her carefully curated image. I complimented her wardrobe, her posts, her branding. I offered to take photos of her listings for my portfolio. I didn't even ask for payment. That's what clinched it. We met for coffee on a Tuesday afternoon. She was even more plastic in person. Every word rehearsed. Every smile calculated. You're adorable, she said, sipping her oat milk latte. We totally have to collaborate. I smiled and said, I'd love that. You have such a beautiful family, by the way. Oh, thank you, she gushed, showing me her lock screen like I hadn't already seen every photo she'd ever posted. They're my world. I stared at the image. Him. Her. The kids. Everyone beaming like they'd never known heartbreak. Like their joy wasn't built on someone else's ruin. I didn't let it show. I kept smiling. Kept nodding. Kept pretending I didn't want to scream. A week later, I was shooting their family photos. That's how fast she trusted me. She invited me into their home, a massive 2-story in a gated suburb, all marble countertops and restoration hardware decor. The place reeked of wealth and Pinterest. I wore my fake name like armor, Amelia, short for nothing, just trendy enough to sound real. I brought my camera, my curated small talk, and a smile I hadn't used in years. When he walked into the room, I almost couldn't breathe. He looked older, thinner. The years had been kind in some ways. His hair was salt and pepper now, his face more lined, but he still had that confident posture. The same way he used to carry me on his shoulders. The same walk. The same hands. He didn't recognize me, not even a flickered. I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Amelia, Julie's new photographer. He shook my hand, said, pleasure to meet you, and walked away to adjust his shirt collar in the mirror. Just like that, like I was no one, like I hadn't been the daughter who waited at the window for months, staring out at empty driveways, hoping for headlights that never came, like I hadn't drawn him birthday cards every year until I was 13, only to watch my mother throw them away so I wouldn't send them. The photo shoot was exactly what you'd expect. Forced candids. Overposed laughter. Julie made the kids redo every shot if their smiles looked tired. The little girl, Ava, was adorable but clearly exhausted. Her older brother, Oliver, kept glancing at the iPad I'd seen him playing on earlier. Neither of them seemed particularly happy, but Julie? She was glowing. At one point, she said, Amelia, could you get a few candids of just me and James? James. The name hit me like a slap. He had changed it. Not legally, his license still said Michael Taylor, according to public records. But to them, to this family, he was James. A new name. A new identity. A new man. He had erased everything. Even himself. I took their photos. I made them look beautiful. I even photoshopped Julie's arms to make her look thinner, and then I went home and stared at the pictures for hours. Not because they were good, but because I was in control of the image now. I knew it was only the beginning. Over the next month, I embedded myself into their world. Julie recommended me to her friends, mostly other desperate housewives with too much money and not enough self-awareness. I took their photos, complimented their homes, coached their kids into smiling. I became a fixture. Julie began inviting me to things, small parties, open houses, girls-only brunches. She called me babe, sent me TikToks, asked me for advice on outfits, and all the while, I watched the way James avoided eye contact with anything too emotional. I watched how he tensed every time Ava asked him to read her a bedtime story. Like intimacy exhausted him. I watched how he drank too much white wine at dinner parties and always disappeared when people brought up their childhoods. He was not as whole as he pretended. He was not untouchable. He was human, and that's what made it easy. One night, Julie invited me to a casual dinner with a few neighbors. She said it would be fun wine, food, conversation. We're something cute but not too dressy. We're chill. I arrived early because I wanted to be there before he got home. Julie was in the kitchen, already tipsy, stirring a pot of something expensive and gluten-free. The kids were watching a movie upstairs. I offered to help. She declined, but kept talking. Her mouth never stopped. James is always late, she sighed. He says traffic, but I swear he just likes making an entrance. I smiled. He seems steady. She laughed. Oh, honey, you have no idea. The man has so many walls up, sometimes I forget what the real him looks like. That was the first crack. I leaned in. You think he's hiding something? She tilted her head, shrugged. Don't we all? I didn't press. I didn't have to. She wanted someone to talk to, and I knew how to listen. That night, while everyone drank wine and gossiped about school board elections and yoga instructors, I sat beside James and made him laugh. Real laughter. Not the tight, PR-safe chuckle he gave in photos. He looked at me like I was a novelty, young, pretty, clever. Like someone new and untainted, and I let him look. I let him ask questions. I let him flirt because I wanted him to. Because I wanted to be the wrecking ball he didn't see coming. I didn't know I could hate someone and crave their attention at the same time. But that's what happened. The more time I spent inside his perfect world, the more I needed him to see me not as Amelia, the pretty photographer Julie introduced at brunch, but as Camille, his daughter, the girl he left behind. But he didn't recognize me, not even a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I dyed my hair darker. I wore contacts instead of glasses. I'd aged, sure, but not beyond recognition. My voice had changed, but not my laugh. Not my eyes. Those were his. He saw me and didn't see me. That made the ache worst. At first, I thought being close would give me relief. Maybe even understanding. But I was wrong. The closer I got, the more I realized I didn't want answers. I wanted consequences, and consequences take planning. I started weaving myself into their lives so carefully it felt like embroidery. No sudden moves. No overt gestures. Just quiet, constant presence. The kind you don't notice until it's too late to pull out. Julie was my gateway. She trusted easily. Too easily. She was always hungry for compliments, always eager to show off her curated life. She introduced me to her neighbors, her clients, her kids' teachers. She even tried to set me up with her dentist. I played along, laughed at her jokes, nodded at her gossip. I was always Amelia. Isn't she just darling? In every room did AT1 brunch, she said. You're like family now. I nearly choked on my mimosa. One Saturday, she invited me to a charity auction. Said James, still can't bring myself to call him that, was too busy, and she needed someone fun to sit with. I promise open bar, she added with a wink. We arrived late. The room was already buzzing with champagne and money. Men in pressed blazers. Women in backless dresses that probably cost more than my rent. The kind of crowd where everything sparkles, but nothing feels real. We mingled, took photos. I kept catching glimpses of him across the room, deep in conversation with a judge or a donor or someone else who mattered. I watched him shake hands and nod like a man with no past. And then, during the paddle raise, Julie leaned over and said, "Bid on something. James won't care." So I did. I raised my hand for a silent auction item, a weekend retreat at some oceanfront villa. No intention of paying. I just wanted to watch his face when my name was called, and it worked. The announcer read it off the card. Winning bidder, Amelia Carter. His head whipped around. His smile faltered. Just for a second. But I saw it. Later, when Julie went to the restroom, he found me by the bar. You know that was a $10,000 weekend, right? I sipped my drink. Oh, I assumed Julie was covering it. He stared. What's your deal? My heart pounded. What do you mean? You don't act like the others. I tilted my head. What others? He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. These people. This whole world. You look like you belong, but it's like you're watching it all. I didn't reply. I just held his gaze until he looked away, That night, he didn't say goodbye. That night, I knew I had him. Things escalated slowly after that. He started texting. In the beginning, it was harmless. What was the name of that photographer you mentioned? Or great shots from last night? You really have an eye. Then it became more frequent. Less professional. You're different. That's not a line. Sometimes I feel like I know you. Ever feel like you're playing a role so long you forget your real face? Each message chipped away at the facade he'd built. Each message was another crack I could slip through. I never answered right away. I let him sit in the silence. Let him overthink. Julie didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't want to. She was busy planning the kids' birthday parties, filming house tours for her YouTube channel, curating her illusion. Meanwhile, I watched him unraveled at ATA dinner party one night. He barely spoke. Sat there swirling his wine, staring off like he was somewhere else. Julie nudged him during dessert. You okay? She whispered, not softly enough. Fine, he said, but his voice was distant. I caught his eye across the table and smiled. He didn't smile back. He started asking me to meet him for coffee. Always framed as work. I have a client shoot downtown. Need your take on lighting. Can you review some edits with me? The first time, we met in a cafe by the waterfront. He ordered black coffee. I had tea. He didn't touch his cup. Instead, he talked about work, about how exhausted he was, about how being successful was a full-time performance. I asked questions like a therapist, listened with careful silence, watched him shrink under his own words. Then, when he finally paused, I said, "Why are you telling me all this?" He looked at me for a long time before answering, because I think you see through it. And he wasn't wrong. I saw all of it. Every mask, every deflection, every thread of guilt he thought he'd buried under golf games and firm partnerships and private school tuition. I saw it all, and I wasn't done yet. The more time we spent alone, the more dangerous it got. He started reaching for little touches. A hand on my lower back, a brush of fingers when handing me a glass. He'd pull away like it meant nothing, but I could see it in his eyes. He was testing boundaries. As I did, I never pulled back, not because I wanted him, but because I wanted him to want me. Not sexually, not romantically. I wanted him to long for something he couldn't understand. Something that made him feel sick with confusion. I wanted him to ache. And he did point one afternoon, after a shoot for a fundraiser he chaired. We ended up alone in his office. The lights were low. He poured us drinks, claiming it was a long week. He handed me a tumbler of scotch, then sat across from me and asked, "Why do you really do photography?" I shrugged. To capture what people are trying to hide. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Ever feel like you're a fraud? I sipped my drink. Every day. He stared down at his glass. I left someone once. Walked away. Thought it would be easier. Cleaner. My fingers clenched around the glass. He went on. But you don't leave yourself behind. You just take the damage with you. I leaned forward. Do they know? No, he said softly. And if they did, I'm not sure they'd recognize me anyway. I set my glass down, stood slowly, and walked to the window. He watched me like he was waiting for something. Some invitation. Some permission. But I gave him nothing. Just silence. Because I wasn't ready yet. The texts became darker. I think about you more than I should. Julie's asleep. I can't stop replaying what you said. I feel like you're not real. Like you came here to wake something up in me. And maybe I did, but what I woke wasn't love. It was fear, regret, rot, the kind of decay you can't clean with confessions. I started leaving breadcrumbs, a comment about a childhood home in Arizona, where we used to live, a photo of a bracelet my mother gave me, the one I wore in kindergarten, lyrics from a song he used to sing in the car when I was little. Each time he paused. Asked questions. Where did you grow up again? Did you ever live in the desert? That song, it's old. How do you know it? I smiled. Changed the subject. Left him stewing. He was circling the truth like prey circling fire. Too curious to run, too afraid to touch. Then came the message that changed everything. It arrived late, just after midnight. I need to tell you something. Can we talk? I didn't reply. 3 hours later, another one. Who are you really? And finally, you remind me of someone. She had your eyes. She was small, fragile, but she looked at me like I was a god. That one broke me, because I remembered looking at him like that. I remembered the way I used to think he could fix anything, carry anything. The way I thought his arms were made of steel, his promises carved in stone. I remembered thinking he'd never leave, and I remembered how wrong I was. The next day, I mailed him a box, NO return address. Inside, a drawing I made when I was 6. A stick figure family. Me, mom, him. Holding hands, his name scrawled in childish block letters. Daddy, on the back, I had written a single word in Sharpie. Remember. There's something disturbing about watching a man crumble under the weight of his own lies, especially when he doesn't know you're the one handing him the bricks. The morning after I sent the drawing, I walked into a coffee shop 2 blocks from his office, needing caffeine and a moment of normalcy before going back to the war I'd started. It was quiet, still early, with only a few customers milling around the wooden counter and the glass pastry case. I ordered black coffee, no cream, no sugar, and took a seat by the window. I opened my laptop, but didn't look at the screen. I stared at the street, watching the flow of people. I wondered if any of them carried what I did. This strange burden, a father-shaped wound, reopened with every step I took into his picture-perfect world. That day, I wasn't Amelia the photographer. I was just Camille. Angry, tired, hollowed out. I told myself I was doing all this for justice, for closure, for the 10-year-old girl who waited by the front window until her eyes hurt from squinting into the dark. But some part of me, a small, sharp part one didn't want to acknowledge, was starting to enjoy it. That terrified me. Later that night, he showed up. I was sitting on my apartment floor, sorting through old photos I'd unearthed from my mother's attic. Most of them were bent and faded, but some were so vivid it felt like being punched in the chest. A picture of me in pigtails, sitting on his shoulders. One of us at the beach, him tossing me into the air while I laughed, my mouth wide with trust. My mom had taken it. I could almost hear her voice behind the camera, and then the knock came. I didn't have to look through the peephole. I knew it was him. He stood there, suit wrinkled, eyes red. For a second, I thought he might collapse. "Camille," he said, voice cracking. "Please." I didn't say a word. Just stepped aside. He walked in like a man entering a church and knew he didn't deserve to be there. He looked around the room. The furniture was sparse, a hand-me-down couch, a thrift store bookshelf, a rug that didn't quite match. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Mine alone. No handouts. No shortcuts. Everything in that room had been earned. He stood in the middle of the room, hands shaking. "You sent the drawing." I nodded. I didn't know," he said. "You didn't know what?" I asked, voice low. He looked down. "That you were her. That Amelia was you." I folded my arms. "And if you had?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat on the edge of the couch like it hurt to sit. "I don't know," he whispered. "I probably would have run." I believe him. I kept waiting for the guilt to fade, he said. At first, it was loud, screaming. Then it got quieter. But it never left. It just changed shapes. I didn't move. I told myself your mother was better off without me, that I was too broken, that you'd forget me and that would be better. "You didn't even try," I said, heat rising in my chest. "You could have written, called, anything." "I was a coward," he said. "Still am." I walked over to the table and picked up one of the photos, the beach one. I handed it to him. He took it with trembling hands. "We were happy," I said. "For a while." His face twisted like he was in physical pain. "I remember that day. Your mother packed a cooler full of sandwiches. You threw half of yours to the seagulls." I wanted to scream, to ask why he'd chosen strangers over that, over us. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. Convenience. He stood. "Julie doesn't know. About you. Not the truth." "Not yet," I said. His eyes shot up. I walked slowly across the room and opened a drawer. I pulled out a second envelope, thicker, heavier, and held it up. "Inside is everything," I said. "Your name, My birth certificate. Photos. Screenshots of every message you ever sent me. He went pale. If you don't tell her by the end of the week, I continued, I will. His breath came faster. Camille, please no, I cut him off. You don't get to beg. Not anymore. I put the envelope back in the drawer and closed it with a finality that made him flinch. He stood there like a man waiting for execution. You built your house on top of a grave, I said. I'm just showing you the bones. He nodded slowly, then turned and walked out without another word. I didn't watch him leave. Instead, I collapsed onto the floor and cried until my ribs hurt, because there's no high in revenge, only aftermath. The next 3 days were a blur. I went to work, answered emails, delivered edits to clients. I smiled when I needed to. I responded to Julie's texts with emojis and exclamation marks. I played my role with precision, but inside, I was framed. I kept waiting for the call, the explosion, but nothing came. No texts. No confrontations, just silence, until the 4th day. I was walking through a farmer's market when I saw Julie. She was standing alone, holding a bouquet of sunflowers, staring at them like she didn't know why she'd picked them up. Her makeup was perfect, her dress spotless, but her hands trembled. I ducked behind a stall and watched her. She looked haunted, and in that moment I knew he had told her. He'd actually done it. I got the message that night. She knows. I told her everything. I'm so sorry. No excuses. No begging. Just that, and then silence. Julie called 2 days later. Her voice was flat. Controlled. I know who you are, she said. I said nothing. I don't know what game you're playing, Camille. But congratulations. You won. I wasn't playing, I said quietly. I just wanted to be seen. There was a pause. Then she said, you destroyed everything. No, I corrected. He did. She hung up, and that was that. Word spread quickly. Somehow, people found out. Friends, neighbors, colleagues. His clients started asking questions. His law firm took his name off the masthead pending internal review. Julie disappeared from social media. The curated life, the filters, the hashtags all gone. They pulled the kids out of school for privacy. I watched it all from a distance, and I felt nothing. Did no joy.no closure, just a strange, hollow stillness. I had done what I came to do, but I wasn't the same, and neither were they. 3 months later, everything felt quieter, not peaceful, not settled, just quiet, in that eerie, pre-storm way, like the world was holding its breath. The aftermath of what I'd done didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It came like fog, creeping in, coating everything, altering the outlines of what had once been solid. Michael James, whatever he called himself now, had vanished from public view. He resigned from his law firm. Health reasons, they said, but everyone knew. In their circle, news travels through whispers faster and sharper than any headline. It wasn't just that he'd cheated. Men like him got away with that all the time. It was what he'd buried. The child he walked away from. The daughter he pretended didn't exist. There's no PR spin for that kind of rot. Julie didn't post anymore. Her Instagram account disappeared one night, right around the time I saw a moving truck outside their house on Birchwood Lane. I drove by, slowly, headlights off. The windows were dark, except for the one upstairs, the master bedroom. I could picture her in there, standing alone, hands clenched around the edges of her curated life as it unraveled between her fingers. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. I hadn't spoken to my mother about any of this. Not directly. I'd hinted once or twice that I was seeing someone from the past, and she'd gone quiet, the way she always did when the conversation brushed up against old scars. She never asked for details. She didn't need them. She had survived Michael's disappearance once. She wasn't about to relive it, and me. I kept moving. I shot weddings, birthday parties, maternity shoots in golden hour light. I smiled. I edited. I delivered flawless images to perfect strangers. But every time I looked through my lens, I saw ghosts. One morning, I found a letter on my doorstep. No postage. No return address. Just my name, written in slanted cursive on a plain envelope. Inside was a photo that it was us, me, my mother, and him. A scanned image of one of those old Polaroids from the late 90s, creased at the edges. We were at a park. I was maybe 6. He was lifting me in the air, and I was laughing so hard my head was thrown back. My mom was in the background, half out of frame, smiling. On the back, a note. She was always the strong one. I'm sorry. No explanations. No excuses. I held the photo for a long time. My hands shook. My vision blurred. I didn't cry. Not yet. A week later, I ran into Julie. It wasn't planned. I was at the hardware store, buying light bulbs, wearing a baggy hoodie and no makeup. I didn't recognize her at first. She looked smaller somehow. Like the air had been let out of her. She saw me before I saw her, and she walked straight up. "Camille," she said. There was no venom in her voice. Just exhaustion. "Julie," I said quietly. She looked me over. I braced for a slap, a scream, something. Instead, she sighed. "You ruined my life." I nodded. "Yeah." She waited. "You don't deny it?" No, a pause. "Then why?" I could have said a lot of things. About abandonment. About pain. About justice. But what came out was raw and simple because he forgot me. And the world let him. Her expression didn't change. "He was a good father," she said softly. "To my kids." I didn't argue. "I believed in him," she continued. "I built my whole world on that belief." "I know. And you took it apart. Brick by brick." "Because it wasn't real," I said. "It was built on the pieces of someone else's." We stood there, 2 women in the middle of an aisle lined with screws and socket wrenches, surrounded by fluorescent lights and the faint smell of rubber. She shook her head. "You could have just come to me." "No," I said. "I couldn't." "You wouldn't have listened." She didn't respond. Just turned and walked away, and I let her, because nothing else needed to be said. I started therapy not long after that, not because I was looking for healing. I just needed someone to speak the truth into the silence. Her name was Dr. Linton. Mid-40s, blunt, no nonsense. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "So, you infiltrated your father's new life under a fake identity to confront his abandonment and punish him," she said during our second session. "How'd that work out for you?" "I got what I wanted," I said, which was. I paused. "To make him hurt." "And did he?" I thought about the letter. The photo. The look on his face that night in my apartment. "Yes." She nodded. "And are you satisfied?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure. Satisfaction wasn't the right word. Maybe it never was. One day, I drove past my childhood home. It had been years since I'd seen it. Someone had painted it a soft green. The tree I used to climb was gone. There was a swing set in the yard, now new, bright, untouched. A woman stepped outside with a toddler on her hip. She looked tired but content. A real mother in a real life. Not perfect. Just present. I parked half a block down and sat there, staring, remembering. I thought about how many nights I'd stood in that front window, waiting for headlights that never came. How many mornings my mom had packed my lunch with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. How many birthdays I'd made wishes I no longer believed in. That house had held all of it. Grief, love, survival. And now it held someone else. I didn't feel angry. I felt grateful. Because even though that house had seen my worst days, it was still standing, just like me. That night, I opened a box I hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside were letters I'd written to him. Crayon-scribbled notes. Birthday cards. Drawings. All unsent. All saved. I burned them. Every single one. Not out of hate. Out of release. I stood on my tiny balcony, the wind tugging at my sleeves, and fed the papers into a metal bowl. Flames licked the sky. Smoke curled up like ghosts. I watched the past turn to ash, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Not healed. Not whole. But lighter. I regret it sometimes. Not because I hurt him, but because I hurt other people in the process. Julie, her kids, people who hadn't broken me, but were collateral damage in my ward. That's the cost of revenge. You hit your target, but the shrapnel hits everyone else. Still, I'd do it again. Because silence breeds ghosts. And I refuse to be one. He tried to rewrite history. I just added myself back in. So if you're out there, watching this, and you've ever been erased, if someone walked away from you and pretended you didn't matter, if you've ever felt like a forgotten page in someone else's perfect book, I see you. I am you, and I promise, your story isn't over. You're still here, and that counts for everything.